The Bank of Canada's survey of consumer expectations published recently shows Canadians' inflation expectations are coming to fruition, with respondents saying they anticipate consistent inflation for gas, food, and rent. The survey found that low-income Canadians are hurt the most by the rising prices. It also found out that most people blame faulty supply chains and COVID for the pain, but increasingly they blame government spending as well. This inflation implies that there would be an increase in the cost of living, the economy would plummet, and the poverty rate would increase. This would lead to an increase in crime as more people would likely look for other ways of sustaining themselves and their families. The Royal Bank of Canada became the first bank in recent times to predict that the nation's economy will fall into recession before the year 2023 amid four-decade inflation, historic labor shortages, and aggressive interest rate hikes. In a new set of projections released last week, RBC said it expects back-to-back quarters of negative growth in 2023, situation economics refer to as a technical recession. This recession follows the pattern of preceding recessions of decades ago. The credit crisis of 1772, the Great Depression of 1929, the OPEC oil price shock of 1973, the Asian crisis of 1997, the financial crisis of 2007, and many others. The scars left by these crises are indelible, and the recovery from such great recessions is nothing to write home about. Amidst the complaints and pessimism, the Bank of Canada is widely expected to storm ahead and raise its key interest rate by a mind-blowing and extremely rare 75 basis points. Just like central banks around the world, Canada is hiking up rates at an alarming rate to stamp out inflation and keep customers in check even as recession looms. Surprisingly, these interest hikes have little effect on the current inflation and rather is serving as a stimulus to a potentially life-threatening situation. The thing is, however, higher rates take months to have their effect on cooling down an overheated economy. They also run a risk of contraction. Already, the American economy contracted in the first quarter of this year and may contract again in the second quarter. In Canada, it looks like the economy shrank in the month of May, although the numbers for jobs in June point to a rather revival of sorts. Although this may sound like a ray of hope, it is merely a fool's errand as there are reports of increasing job layoffs in various sectors of the economy. But even if the central bank has no other choice but to push rates dramatically higher to control inflation, can governments use their fiscal power to stifle inflation, while also mitigating the chances of a recession next year? The government are trying to reassure the citizens that it is under control, but the data shows a heavy downtrend and a looming financial catastrophe.
There is no country better positioned in the world, certainly no country in the G7 better positioned than Canada to achieve that soft landing.
Whether or not this statement has an actual glimmer of hope is subject to debate, as they are controversial views on the claim. On one hand, there is the fact that a recession cannot be established until it is underway, and at this point there are so many buffers, like high interest rates, high savings, and many job vacancies, which makes it a little more complicated to just say that we are in a recession. How the job market performs right now becomes a yardstick to measure the probability of a recession. Would we see a gentle impact on the market, or will this morph into mass layoffs, income loss, and others? So the job market is the determinant of whether this becomes a soft landing or we have a classic recession. On the other hand, the Bank of Canada has only one trick up its sleeves, which is hiking the interest rate. This begs the question, how much is enough to curb the recession? You raise the interest rate and you don't see inflation coming down, and then you raise it again. Moreover, it takes time for a change in interest rate to reflect on the labor market. It takes a longer time than that to influence wage and price changes. One thing to remember, though, is that the range on interest rate is still extremely low, and the fact that the Bank of Canada is still adding stimulus that is encouraging inflation because they haven't raised the interest rate to the neutral rate. As for the finance minister saying that we are in a better condition is sort of like winning a race when everybody else is running backwards, says Don Drummond, former Senior VP and Chief Economist, TD Bank. We are not in that race because we are so heavily indebted. Households, particularly with mortgages, lines of credit, government sector, and private sectors, have debt beyond the eyeballs, so we are very vulnerable to an interest rate increase. This is to show that the trump card the government has is nothing short of an impending coincidence, as everything would have led to this same point. That raises another question: would the government find any other means of fighting this, or should we all sit back and watch ourselves fall into an economic despair? As the whole drama unfolds, the labor market seems to have some momentum now and for the next few months as people go back to various activities they have missed doing, and also bookings have been made and spendings have been locked in. What is rather interesting, however, is what happens down the road towards the fall as those interest rates bite even further and the housing market lines up a series of declines, and the psychology. The negative mood sets in, and maybe that's the time we start to see the employers laying off some people or hiring much less. That's where the danger zone would sort of open up more clearly. And the fact remains that this danger zone is closer than it appears. We have come to the end of today's video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications. Thanks for watching.